Test. 1, 2, 3. Bo, 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 bo. Test. You and me. Bo, 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 bo. Test. 1, 2, 3. Oh, it works, y'all. It works. Ain't been on in a little while. Figure I'll come on in and talk about some stuff here. All right. Just trying to get set up, y'all. Got a lot of stuff to go over today. Yeah. A whole lot. Hey, everybody, Sirwalterj Jones Show. I'm he. It is the evening weekend edition. Baby. How y'all is? Come on in. Oh, yeah, the water is fine. I've got some of you over here. You over here on my screen here, Facebook Live, and I got some of you here watching us on YouTube, and some of you who are probably listening to us on our podcast on SPREAKER.com. How y'all doing? It's good to see you. I want to talk about a few hundred year. I thought it was something on the board. Ain't nothing up there. So, hey, shout out to you for the many of you who are signed in here. Dave Priest and Charlie Milam and Demetra and Erica and Deanne and Craig. And it's a whole bunch of y'all. I want to talk about why is it that this Alabama abortion law is a brilliant move. Brilliant. Yes, I got it ready. If men were the ones who... Okay, I'm sorry, y'all. I can't read that. I got it. This is going to be a long show alert. It's going to be lengthy. You may have to go to bed. It's going to be kind of long, y'all. So I'm sorry. That's just the way it is. And you can go back tomorrow and rewind this because it's lengthy, because I got to take you through a history of America. And I'm going to do it by doing it this way. The scripture says, especially the writer, the preacher of Ecclesiastes, talk about there's nothing new under the sun. What shall come has happened, and vice versa. And so the thing that we're seeing in this particular millennium is something that we saw in the last millennium and the millennium before that. All right. And I'll explain that what's happening with this abortion bill is nothing new. This is something that has happened in several times among both sides. I will say, though, that there are three types of people in America. Here's what I did before I started the show. I figured I'd sit down and write most of my notes on an envelope. Yeah, an envelope. Yeah, most of my notes are here. I'm trying to go back into my understanding of history. I got straight A's in history in grammar school and then in high school and went to college and what have you. So I loved history, and I retained a lot of the information. And then as the technology exploded with American Online and CompuServe and those discs that used to come to the house, you were able to sign online with your baud rate, 360 baud rate, and then went up to 12 and then 2400, blah, blah, blah. Prodigy Online, and we were able to surf the web, and we were going to these bulletin boards and what have you. And I began to then be able to search InfoSite and Excite.com. And this is before Google came along. And then Yahoo, right? That's how we got our information. You were searching for things. The encyclopedias came to the house, and I would go through the encyclopedia. I would read the dictionary from page 1 all the way to the last page, and I couldn't wait for the next year's encyclopedia to come when they had door-to-door. So a lot of the stuff I retained, watching PBS, public broadcast system, and things like that. And then now, thank God for Google, we're able to research. But a lot of this came out of my head and from some of the researchers and some of the shows I've done in the past. And so, but I want to say that this is an issue of three. There's a three-tier issue here. This is it right here. Okay? It's about moral immorality and what? Hypocrites. Okay? Or hypocrisy. That's what's going on here. This law is not exclusive. This is not an isolated incident. Everything that America has ever done, all the way back to not even farther back than the signing of the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution, it goes all the way far back there. We know that slavery started in what, 11 or 16, 18, 16? I don't know, somewhere around there. Okay, but it goes back even further than that. It has a lot to do with moral immorality and hypocrisy. And there are two political groups in America. We know that there are Republicans and there are the Democrats. But there are also the moderates. Okay? Moderates. All right? So, the Republican, Democrats, and the moderates, or the moral, the immoral, and the hypocrites. You're like, well, which one is the moral? Which one is the immoral? Is it the Republican are moral and the Democrat are moral? All of them. They're meshed in there. It's a melting pot, a cesspool, a plurality of moral people in each party, immoral people in each party, and hypocrites in each party. Just like religion, the Catholics and the Presbyterians and the Lutherans, those who are Protestant, those who are Church of God in Christ, those who are Apostolic and Baptist, and, all right, hypocrisy in them as well. So the system that we see in laws that are passed, whether they're local laws, the local states, or the government at large, it has a lot to do with these three things, and I'm going to show you through history why this is important to you. Okay? Hope y'all with me. It's going to be a long one, y'all. It's going to be a long one. Right, I read all through encyclopedia. Yeah, come on. It's going to be a lengthy one, so y'all can go to bed and wake up tomorrow. All right? But here I was looking at generations. All right? The Bible kind of gives us a hint on how long generations are. You've got generations that start at 40, a generation is 70, and a generation is 100 years. All right. So you look at the dispensations of time especially the Old Testament, and you see how God tested the Jews, the Israelites, through generations. All right. Some people think that 20 is a generation. Okay, but this is typical here. And when you look at the establishment of the United States, the overtaking of this body of land, all right, way before, I say after 1492 when so-and-so sailed the ocean blue, okay, Columbus, he came here and he discovered that somebody was already here. And so you can kind of start your clock, not at 1400, but you should start your clock around 1600, all right? So these generations, I'm going to show you that something happened in America as it pertains to a generation of how things happen. There is in Scripture, it talks about how knowledge will be increased in the book of Daniel, and people will go to and fro, all right, and the books will be open. And so you'll notice during the 1900s, especially through the Industrial Revolution, things start advancing much faster than it did back in the time of the establishment of our country. I'm looking at 1630s, okay? 1630s, and you go, 1680s, okay? Let's assume that that's a generation, all right? 1680s. And then I would go to 1740s. And then I would probably go to the 1780s. Let's say 1786, okay? You're going to see a comparison happen, but something happened, that a repeat of history happening in here. Then when you get to the 1800s, you're going to see the same thing happen, okay, here. And then another generation, 1860, all right? You're going to see a repeat of history in a 40-year generation and a 100-year generation. So what we're seeing in our immoral laws of today, you're going to notice that this happened all the way back to the 1600s. It repeated in the 1700s. It repeated in the 1800s. And then, of course, 1860. Then we're going to have the 1960s, another repeat of this will be a 100-year repeat here. Okay, you're going to notice that, y'all. I'm telling you. And if you found American history boring, then you who are Christians especially, you're going to miss it all. You are going to miss everything that happens to us in this country. Y'all understand? Yeah, All right, y'all. Y'all go to bed because this is going to be a long one. It's going to be a long one, all right? So I say in 1860, we've got a man by the name of John Winthrop, okay? I remember him. He was the governor, okay, of the newfound states, all right, the colonies. Now, about 12 colonies, he was a governor, and he pushed this religion he was actually a Puritan, okay? Mr. John Winthrop. Puritans, they reigned supreme at the beginning of let's say around 1630, okay? Reigned supreme, all right? And there are certain areas, matter of fact, I got notes here. He was the governor, and he was a wealthy English Puritan lawyer, one of the leading figures in the founding of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, the first major settlement in what is now New England and Plymouth Colony. Okay, and the Puritans, I think they renamed themselves. I think they're called the Congregational. I believe that. Y'all can Google that. I believe the Puritans are now the Congregational Church. All right, later renamed themselves. All right, so John Winthrop's teaching of purity, the Puritans, is that the Puritans they went by the book. They, as a matter of fact, they would be like what the Catholics were. Okay, and like how many of them are today. He and the people up under this, the governing body, interpreted the scriptures for you, and you had to work for your religion. You had to do a works-based. It was works-based, all right? And you the only way you can get to heaven is that you had to go out there and do things, all right? And again, that sounds like what the Catholic Church were all about. And then in walked a woman by the name of, what was her name? I think her name was Anne Hutchinson. Anne Hutchinson, okay? The women, boy, the women of this time, okay? Anne Hutchinson, okay? She was a direct threat to John Winthrop. And who was Anne Hutchinson? You can go ahead and Google her name and get her history. Very smart, educated, well off. She knew the Bible well. And I'm bringing her up is because even though this is the 1830s, I'm trying to show y'all how many of you are like this today. When John Winthrop represents a particular body in our lives, in today's life, in the year 2000, at the time of this recording is 2019. Maybe he represents the government. Maybe he represents the Catholic Church. Maybe he represents your boss. I don't know. And Anne Hutchinson represents you who are free thinkers, you who don't take any mess, you will give your life for the gospel, you who are missionaries and evangelists, then you would represent, Anne Hutchinson would represent who you are. A very educated mother of 11 children and was highly respected among the women in Boston. And she told the people that God spoke to her directly and said that she is saved. And the Puritans didn't believe that a man could be saved because of Adam, and that they had to work a lifetime of reading their Bibles, wishing and hoping they'd make it in. And so Winthrop's law was church, family, and then state. His law was church first. Y'all understand that? Church, then family, okay, then state, okay? And that's how the Pentecostal church operate today. It's all about church. All right. Your wife says, stay home, baby. No, I got to go to church. Your husband says, stay home. No, I got to go to church. Your money, your tithe, your offerings and all that stuff. Some of you have put the church in your wills and your life insurance. OK, and your trust, your church. OK, and so your finances go to the church, and some of you are hiding your cars and your lights are being turned off and gas is being turned off and kids can't go to college because the church have a need. And that is the system of today. The John Winthrop church, then family, then state. All right. But Anne Hutchinson act like I do today. OK. All right. And so what happened was she was preaching the gospel of salvation, that you can be saved and you don't need all of this other man-made stuff. And they put her, they took her to court. OK, you got to understand, he was the governor. All right. She lived among the Puritans. And so they had a meeting with her and they excommunicated her and they charged her with what's called sedition. They said that she was seducing. All right, let me turn that off. She was seducing the women of the towns because she was like, what do you call them? A surrogate mother. When a woman was would have a baby, with getting ready to, and the bag broke, and she would be the one that show up. All right, not a surrogate, but a midwife. Is that what you call them? I get them mixed up. Okay, and they excommunicated her just like Abraham and Sarah had. What's her name, to get out of town. All right. So that was during the 1630s. Notice a trend here. Notice a trend. Notice the similarity of today's world opposed to what happened in the 1630s. Okay. Y'all with me? All right. Then another generation happens after this. What Anne Hutchinson did, though, Anne Hutchinson laid a seed in America, a seed of salvation. Anne Hutchinson laid a seed for evangelicals to rise up. What she did, even though she was excommunicated out of those colonies, the women heard the gospel through her teaching and preaching, and they began to rise up. Now, many of them were also excommunicated out of town with her, but that seed stayed. Y'all understand? It's thank you, Cynthia, a midwife. All right, that seed stayed. Okay, all right. Now, then in walk the 1680s. Okay, and the Spanish, I believe the Spanish conquistadors. I think that's how you spell it. Yeah, I don't know. Conquistadors. Yeah, the Spanish conquistadors came to, well, what's today known as New Mexico. Okay, well, who was already here? The conquistadors brought their religion. What was their religion? Catholicism. Catholicism. Yes. Who was already here? The Pueblo Indians. Yes, they were here. And the Pueblo Indians did not believe in worshiping one God. The Catholics did, although they implemented all of these other things like worshiping Mary and worshiping, praying to saints or what have you. Still, it was kind of monolistic, all right. But the Pueblo Indians, they worship everything: the sun god, the moon god, the earth god, and all kind of things. Okay, and humanism and what have you. So, but the Pueblo Indians were very open. They were very open to inclusion, I guess you can call it. And the Spanish conquistadors brought their faith and their teachings of the Catholicism to the Pueblo Indians, and the Pueblo Indians accepted their teachings and began to attend the Catholic Mass. Okay, they began to attend the masses by the hundreds. And the Spanish thought that they were winning these Pueblo Indians, but then they would go to the territories where the Pueblos were, and they realized that the Pueblos went back to worshiping their own gods, their demigods, and the earth gods and sky gods, and they got upset. The Spanish said, "Well, this is not working," and so they began to beat the Pueblo. They began to punish the Pueblo. They began to throw them in jail. Oh, they did all kind of stuff, because this is, y'all know the Catholics. Y'all know how the history of the Catholics through the Crusades and the Inquisitions, okay, and the medieval times and all this stuff. Okay, they got a horrible history. The witch burnings the witch burnings really wasn't. Okay, all right. So they had a horrible history. So what did they do? They started to attack the Pueblo Indians. And the Pueblo Indians, they didn't realize, was a very powerful people. And what happened? They turned on them. And the Pueblos waged war on the Spanish conquistadors. And they began to wipe out the Catholic priests, and 400. They killed 400. Okay, that may seem like a small number, but back then you got to understand those colonies were very small. All right, 400. The Pueblo Indians killed 400 of them, and guess how many of those were priests? Half of them, 200 of them, were priests. The priests were the ones that were killing and burning and pillaging the Pueblo because they would not convert over to Catholicism, because conversion meant to renounce your religion, your belief system, your faith, and convert over to one other faith. All right, and the Pueblo wasn't for that. They were for multiple. They believed in worshiping multiple gods, like the Egyptians did to the Israelites. All right, and they turned on them, killed 400 of them, and 2,000 of them conquistadors fled. They left town. They had to get out of there. All right, but why did that happen? What is the similarity? What is the similarity with this story as it pertains to today? The Pueblos allowed pluralism. They allowed this conclusion, this what y'all call this ecumenical type things, these interfaith services and things that y'all come together, and this priest will do this prayer, and this Buddha would do this prayer, and this Hare Krishna would do this prayer, and and that's what's happening. So that happened in the 1680s. All right, there's nothing new under the sun. This is America, and this is the foundation of America. What you're seeing today is nothing new. This seed has been planted in this country. All right, so that's the generation that's passed right there. That's the one from the 1630s to the 1680s, and I think the next generation would probably be the 1740s. Yes, because then the Lord was working through all of this through what we may call the rebirth. The rebirth. See, remember Anne? Remember Miss Anne? Y'all remember Miss Anne? I talked about how she planted that seed, Anne Hutchins. Well, Anne Hutchins' seed from 1630 lasted a whole 100 years. That generation, 100 years, and that seed landed on a man by the name of George Whitefield. Oh, yeah, we're getting close, y'all. George Whitefield. His name is spelled different a couple ways. Okay, Whitefield. Sometimes it's white. It's pronounced white. It's spelled Whitefield, but it's still Whitefield. All right, George Whitefield. He, I believe, was the beginning of what we may call the Great Awakening. There are about 4 Great Awakenings, and this, I believe, was the beginning of the first Great Awakening. Great Awakening. What is it? It's a revival. The Great Awakening. George Whitefield. Who was he? Well, I think he was an Anglican. Okay? He was an Anglican. We'll talk about that in a minute. But he was a radical Anglican, because it's because of him, I believe, he became the co-founder of, that's right, the Methodist Church. Okay? He used a system called method. Method means of the heart. Of the heart. You worship of the heart and from the heart. It's a rebirth, to be born again. This is something that was rejected by the church prior to that. The Puritans didn't understand. The Catholics didn't understand rebirth. But when Anne Hutchinson had left this seed, and well, that seed began to have babies over 100 years and gave birth to George Whitefield, and he co-founded the Methodist Church through this wonderful thing called the Great Awakening. Okay, now that's 1740. All right, now we see this revival that's begun to spark up, and the seed of these revivals will last for another 100, 200 years, because then different great awakenings pop up. All right, begin to pop up. All right, y'all still with me? Good. Some of y'all with me. Some of y'all got to go to bed, because at the time of this recording, it is going on 12 o'clock on the East Coast. All right. Okay, then I don't know. Let's go with 1786. That's a good, it was a very good year. Oh, who came on the scene? The Baptists. Yeah. Oh, the Baptists, y'all. The Baptists came on the scene. Y'all like, weren't they already on the scene? Yeah, they were. They were. Let me see here. I don't know what's going on here with my thinking. Okay, come on back. All right. The Baptists came on the scene. I'm going to show y'all something here because the Baptists begin to do something that some of y'all say that doesn't seem like the Baptist church. Well, it may not seem like the Baptist church that you know today. Let's see where I want to go with here. Oh, the Baptists and the Presbyterians. All right. They invited Whitefield to preach in packed houses, but the Anglicans banned him, and Whitefield ignored denominational lines, and he preached being born again. But then something happened in the great state of Virginia. If you live in Virginia, thank God for your history. Well, if you're black, I don't know. But the elite was a part of the Anglican Church, and the Baptists were winning through baptism and being born again. That's right, y'all. The Baptists were teaching being born again in Virginia. And they were being slain in the spirit. That's right, the Baptists. Okay? And during this time, a man by the name of Thomas Jefferson was on the scene. Okay, look at that date there. Y'all know that. Y'all say that we became a nation in 1776. Well, okay, I'll let you have that one. But the Declaration of Independence was not signed then. It took another decade for things to happen. So let's erase that because that's not true. Okay, all right. But the Baptists, okay, began to evangelize and witness and teach people. Again, Ann Hutchins, all right, then George Whitefield, okay, and then these Baptists came on the scene. Now, Thomas Jefferson received this letter from the Baptists because it seemed like what was happening was these Anglicans in Virginia, it was like a state-ran religion. A state-ran religion. All right, y'all gonna see some similarities here because I want to read the Declaration of Independence to see that. Remember, I put up there hypocrisy, immorality, morality, and hypocrisy. Well, that document that we defend so wonderfully, the Constitution, there are hypocritic ways that how we treat foreigners and people of color. All right, and our xenophobic ways. And we come from. I'm saying we because we live in America, but y'all, okay, ran from this same tyranny and signed and drew up this document to free yourself from the tyranny and the grips of Great Britain to do the same thing to the people who were coming into the colonies. The same thing, the hypocrisy. Thomas Jefferson, who wrote up that particular document, I'll read it in a minute, he was not a religious man. He was more spiritual, but he was not religious. He was spiritual, and I think there's a difference between the two. All right. They wrote him a letter and told him to do something about it because they understood the power that he had. And then he wrote them back, or he decided to establish something with the people of Virginia, the government of Virginia. Now, I'm doing it fast because it could take a while for me to explain what Thomas Jefferson did for the Baptists. What we have today that came out of that is separation of what, y'all? Separation of what, y'all? Y'all go ahead and put that in the thing in. Yes, you said watch yourself. Yeah, all right. Thomas Jefferson decided to write up this suggestion of separation of, there you go, of church and state. Yes, okay. All right. Which gave birth to what we're going to see a year later in 1987. All right. Okay? Why? Well, Thomas Jefferson really didn't care about your God. And when you listen to many of the founders, that many of the Republicans, especially those who are conservative, I'm a conservative man. When you watch shows like Fox News and TBN and stations like that, and they talk about how the founders were religious, and they loved God. They did not love God. They were deists. They were not saved. They were not Christian. They were deists. They really didn't believe in Jesus. As a matter of fact, Thomas Jefferson took the scriptures that seemed to have many miracles in them, and he put holes. He took his Bible and he literally took scissors. All right. He literally took scissors. Okay. And he went in there in the New Testament. He found where Jesus did miracles, and he cut them out. He cut them out. All right. And then he came up and drew up his own moral laws in a sense. And so he drew up the separation of church and state. Now, what that does not say, what it seemed like it's saying. There is no separate hierarchical body, or sometimes y'all call it Christendom. Well, in order to be Christendom, you must be a kingdom, and Christian is not a kingdom. Y'all say, but aren't we part of the kingdom? No, Christendom is not a word, nor is it a thing. Okay, Christendom, you must have a system set up and as a kingdom, and you're not. You are part of the kingdom of God, or the kingdom of heaven, but that's not Christendom. All right. So to say separation of church and state is to say that, okay, the church is a separate body, self-governing body, and it is a sovereign body. All right. Well, it is if you were in a system of theocracy. Theocracy. Okay. And what is that? Theocracy simply means of God, or God rule. This is the system that God wanted. This is the system that God wanted for the Jews and the Israelites, the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, Judah and Israel. Okay. That's the system that he wanted. They did not want that system. They rejected that system. And that's how they got King Saul in there. Okay. Because they wanted a king. All right. Like all the other nations. And when the United States got set up, they also thought to also have a king, because George Washington could have been called king. Okay. George Washington, of course, was the first president of the United States, and they considered calling him king. And so the same thing, this history repeats itself. So because the church is not under, we're supposed to be under God rule, but we don't act that way, living under the laws, the rules and regulations of the United States. All right, especially those of you who then take on the 501c3 filing. Now you really pull yourself away from theocracy of God rule. Then you become what's called a creature of the state. That's what 501c3 is. So the church has been in error for hundreds of years, because you've laid up under the governmental body. And I'm going to show you how the great awakening changed some of that. All right. So this is the history of the church that you don't hear about. You don't hear taught about in your churches and your communities and in your home. But I teach my children this, and I'm teaching y'all this as well. All right. This stuff is very important. So Thomas Jefferson said separation of church and state. What does that mean? It means that the government is not to dig into the affairs of the church and vice versa. That doesn't mean that the church don't obey the rules or the rule of law, what's called. All right. But it means that we shouldn't be meddling in your right to worship whoever you want to worship. That's what church and state separation means. It's this fight in the courts of law, because is it really in the Constitution? Yeah, a system of government in which priests rule in the name of God. Okay, yes. That's one definition. Okay. You got to go spread out that definition, Demetra. Spread it on out. Spread it out. All right. So that's 18. Okay. So we did 1630. We did 1680. We went to 1740s. We went to 1786. Okay. Well, let's see. Then I think what we can do is go to the 1830s. All right. Y'all see what's happening here? We're jumping to these generations here where the evangelicals began to flourish again, and Hutchinson, and then you got George Whitefield there, and these others who I haven't mentioned, but in the 1830s became another type of great awakening. And so what happened? The evangelicals began to I would say they became socialists. Okay, they became socialists because when you go to the book of Acts, it talks about how they came together after the ascension of Jesus Christ. The Bible says that they bought and sold things, and they had all things common. Okay, all things common. All right. That's the first century church. Well, in 1830, they began to revert back to the first century church in the Bible. Yes, there was a time in America, 1830s, where evangelicals began to travel the depth and breadth of this country, winning souls, and people were getting saved and slain in the spirit and all kind of things, okay? But not just that spiritually, but they began to do social work. And what was the social work? They began to visit, it takes too long to write it, prison ministries. They began to, well, y'all know slavery was going on here. They became the abolitionists as well, okay? Many of these evangelicals became the abolitionists against slavery, and we see then we'll see names like Sojourner Truth pop up, and Harriet Tubman and what have you. They were part of this revolution here. Women's voting. They cared about women voting. They cared about the orphans. They ran orphans. They built orphans. I'm talking about evangelicals. Okay. They went after the homeless. They built homeless shelters. They went and tried to. They went into the school system. They were building schools. All right. This is the 1830s, and if you lived in the 1830s and you were saved at that time, it was a good time for you. Okay. It was a great time for you. All right. Now. Then something happens after this. All right? Something happens because 1830, what happens next is a repeat of what happened to us in the 1960s, I believe, with, I would probably say, with prayer in schools. Okay? 1830, the evangelicals were having a great time. So they say that the United States is a Christian nation. It was not built off of Christianity. No. It was built off of deism and belief or individual belief, and then more so it was more state-ran because the Anglican Church were dominant, especially down in the southern southeast parts of the country. And then you start seeing more of the main denominations today. You start seeing them pop up like the Methodists and the Presbyterians, okay, and what have you. But then 1840 happened. That's what happened. Just 10 years later, the 1840s, what happened? America opened its gates. It opened its gates. It's doing what we're doing is the reverse. We're closing the gates, but they opened the borders. And who did they open the borders to? You see, what happened in other countries is what caused America to go into a moral decline. What happened in other countries, them coming over, caused America to go into a moral decline. And we're going to see this again another 100 years from this point on. Okay? And this is like Jewish history as well. Okay? All right. America welcomed who? They welcomed the Irish. They welcomed the Irish. And who did the Irish bring with them, or what did the Irish bring with them? They brought with them Catholicism. Okay? That's what they brought with them. Right? Was that a problem? Yes. It was a big problem. Big problem because the evangelicals had already established the prisons and the orphanages and the homeless shelters and the schools. They ran everything in America, and it was almost like a state-run thing, Christianity. Now when people say that America is a Christian nation, it was in 1830. It was in 1840. And it's not today, but it was here. Christians ran everything until the Catholics came through the Irish and some of the other immigrants. They came. Now, but here's the thing. They wasn't so much the problem. That's the thing about it. See, the Catholics were the problem back in the Inquisitions and the Crusades, and I talked about all that. They were, and the Spanish conquistadors, yes. But when they came here, they really was kind of peaceful. I know they did a movie about the five corner. What's that? The New York. What's the movie? That movie that in New York about the gangs of New York. Yeah, that's the movie, the gangs of New York. Okay. Yes, there was. And all that is truth, and I love that movie because this was happening during this time. They hated the Irish. Americans hated them. And especially because they were, first of all, they just hated Irish people. Number two, they hated them because they were bringing Catholicism in there, and that was against what not Pentecostals, but what Protestants built and raised up and established in America, and their schools. All right, I'll get to that in a minute. Well, actually, yes. Let's get to that now. The reason why this was a problem is because even the teachers in the public schools were Christians. They were evangelicals. And the Catholics began to put their children in these schools. Well, if the teachers were Christians and the public schools, then guess what the books were? The books were anti-Catholic. Okay? You see what's happening here? So the Catholics put their kids in Protestant schools because the Catholics didn't have anything. They were poor. They came here and they might have built some synagogues, not synagogues, but cathedrals, okay? Then they put their kids in these, and the Irish were poor. They put their kids in these schools, and the schools, the books were anti-Catholic. All right, and it seemed like the government, the states, were doing everything that was unconstitutional, because it was like it was against the First Amendment in the sense. Okay, Congress shall make no law to establish one religion in the government. And it seemed like that's what was happening. And so what happened? The Catholics then pulled their children out of these schools. And where did the kids go? Well, the kids just walked around the streets. They were poor. They were walking. They were breaking in homes. They were doing all kinds of things. And it just peed off the Christians. And what happened? They began to fight against the Catholics, and they began to burn the Catholic parishes, burn the churches, burn the homes. So it wasn't the Catholics that was doing this. It was you evangelicals. You evangelicals were doing the same thing that crazy Baptist church over that bombs the abortion clinics and that's calling people going to these rallies. What's the name of that Baptist church called, y'all? There's always causing problems. They brought a lot of disease also. Amber Rogers says yes. And yes, the average, they did. And so there was so much problems here. So there became, the Bible talked about in the last days there would be a war against war, nation against nation. But this will be called Basilica, Basilia, sometimes Basilica may be used, okay. Basilica, that means religion against religion in the last days. So yes, that's Catholic against Protestant. That's Jews against Gentile. All right. That's I guess you can say the Muslims against the Jews. All right. That was happening in the 1840s. Okay, now. Then, as we get close, I told y'all this is long. It's going to be lengthy. All right? But here's what happens next. Okay? These were the Quakers. Okay? Y'all remember the Quakers. Okay? The Quakers, the evangelicals. Okay, the Quakers are the ones who started the public schools. All right? And they were very, very anti-Catholic. Now, while they were fighting in 1840, right as we see 1830, here's a revival is happening in the 1830. It's like a revolution. It's a spiritual revolution happening. The 1840s, they opened up the borders, and the poor Irish came in, and they brought everything with them, including their disease, as she says, and they brought their religion with them. And the nation was anti-Catholic. And guess who creeped in, y'all? Guess who creeped in? You will never guess in a million years who creeped in during all of that fight. You see, 1840s, up 1850s, because something's going to happen in 1960 because y'all are too busy fighting. Something happens in the 1960s with schools. I'm trying to tell y'all, if you don't study this history, you're deemed to repeat it. Here's what happened. 1859. Who walks on the scene? His name is Charles. What? Anybody know who walked on the scene? Anybody know? Anybody know? Okay, I'll finish it for you, for those of you who are slow. Charles Darwin walked on the scene. Who was he? Was he an outsider? No, he wasn't an outsider. As a matter of fact, Charles Darwin was studying to be a priest, a preacher, a reverend. I forgot what denomination. I don't know if it was I forgot if he was Catholic or Protestant. I can't remember. Yeah, he was studying to be a priest. He hated it. Yeah, Demetra said Koldrick. She said Koldrick. Okay, not C.H. Mason. No, not yet. You're getting close to C.H. Mason. Yes. Okay. Then this one thing, he took a trip. I can't even spell it. To the Galapagos, I think. I don't know. Some of y'all, somebody put the spelling in there. He went down there to the Galapagos Islands while y'all was fighting the Catholics. You evangelicals out there, while your grandparents was fighting, Satan was raising up a champion for evil. Charles Darwin. All right? Who did this? Who allowed this? I believe God allowed this. Okay? Because whether this is permissive will or whether it's perfect will, he allowed it. And Satan was raising up Charles Darwin in the midst of this fight. All right? He went over to the Galapagos Island and he began to study these birds. I think they call them finches. And he saw these tortoises. Okay? And he saw these strange animals on these islands. There were several islands, y'all. Yeah, Galapagos. Yes, I was close. Galapagos. Okay, did I get it? I think I might have got it. All right, y'all. Can y'all tell me how many islands it was? I can't even remember. I don't know. Was it 7 to 10 islands? I don't remember. But here's the thing about the islands. Charles went over there to because he loved to dissect animals. If you ever read his autobiography, well, that's not an autobiography. Where is it? I don't know. Somebody wrote his story, and I'm reading his story, and he loved science. He loved biology. Okay, and he would be in the backyard as a young man, and he would catch animals and kill them and dissect them. That's just what he did. So he travels over to the Galapagos Islands, and then he sees the same species on different islands, but the same species is different on different islands. And he couldn't understand how a finch on island number 1 have long beak, but this same species of a finch on the second island got a short beak. And the same species on the third island got a oblong curved beak. And he's trying to figure out, if there is a God, why would a God have a turtle on this island with a long head and a short head on this island? And it makes no sense. God is confusing. Surely that can't be a God, because a God is a God of order. Do you understand what I'm saying? Thank you. 13 islands. All right, I was close. I was close. 13 islands. All right. He got confused. I believe, just like I believe he was the disciple who was sitting at the table, and Jesus says, "Whatever you're gonna do, do it quick." And the Bible says that Satan entered into him at the table. Okay, I think that's what happened to Charles Darwin when he went to the Galapagos Island. I believe it. He was a Judas. Okay, and then he came to a conclusion through Satan, I believe, that there can't be a God, because this makes no sense. And he began to write this book. The book is a long title. All right. Some people say, Walter, your book got a long title. The Men's Chronicles, A Woman's Guide to Men, Volume 1, The 4 Women That Men Desire. That's a long title, ain't it? All right. Oh, no. This title ain't nothing compared. Oh, a shameless plug. It's on Amazon.com. Cling. Okay. That title ain't nothing compared to Darwin's theory. We call it Charles Darwin, or Darwin's theory of evolution. But the name of it is On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. That's the name of the book. Yes, it inspired his theory. That's right. Yes, that's the name of the book. Okay, let's break it down. On the Origin of Species. All these species on the Galapagos Islands, there was an origin, but he X God out. He says, no, there's something here. He says, it's called natural selection. There was no creator. There was no intelligent design. But this was naturally selected. Then he says, or the preservation of favored races. So why was this species on this island but not on that island? Is because it was a selection to preserve this race. And now when he's talking about races, he wasn't talking about the animals. Now he's talking about you. Okay, the preservation of favored races in the struggle for life. And what that book really was, it was pretty much his tell-all of how racist he was. And how do we know he was a racist? Because a man by the name of Adolf Hitler wrote a book too. Did I spell Adolf wrong? Is it PH at the end? I don't remember. Adolf Hitler wrote a book too. I think he called it Mein Kampf. Okay? And Mein Kampf was inspired by what? Charles Darwin's book, 1859. Adolf Hitler wiped out how many Jews? 6 million of them. All right? Because it was the preservation of favored races in the struggle of life. And he considered that the Germans were a superior race over the Jews. Over the Jews. And so did Charles Darwin. And that's why, that's why slavery or racism, that is, and xenophobia, what have you, is so prominent in so many areas. Okay? So that's what's happening here. Okay? Yes. Some of y'all didn't know that history, but now you do. All right. So now, that's the 1840s. Okay. 1859, while y'all was asleep, Charles Darwin comes in, and then his book becomes well known and accepted. Where? Where does this book get accepted? Okay. Where does this book get accepted? 1859. It gets accepted in the public schools. But how? How can that be if this is a Christian nation? How can that book be accepted after this wonderful revolution here, spiritual revolution and great awakening? And even through the 1840s, yeah, the Irish were here with the Catholicism, what have you, but surely could it have come through the Catholics? Could they be part of the reason why it became so well versed and accepted in the public schools? Okay? Can it? Some of y'all maybe can answer that question for me. Because then you have to understand, during that time, actually, the YMCA was formed, 1844, and a man by the name of Dwight, what's his name? Dwight L. Moody also came on the scene around this time. So, man, this was a great revolution here. And YMCA, that's a Christian organization. Young men's Christian something, okay? All right? But yet, that book got put into schools and well accepted around the country. Now, here's the thing about evolution, though. I'm not totally against evolution, because to be totally against evolution would be like atheists who are totally against the Bible. You're like, where are you going with this, Elder Jones? Well, it's going to make sense in a minute, and if it don't, it's because your eyes are not open. Your eyes are not open. Okay? The theory of evolution is not just about, and I think I skipped something here. Yeah, I'll go ahead and skip that, because I was going to read the Declaration of Independence to show you how important the history prior in the 1700s, how important, because most of you have never ever read the Declaration of Independence. I'm not talking about the preamble, we the people in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, blah, blah. I'm talking about that all who are members or who are citizens of the country, you are, matter of fact, let's look at the wording here, because the wording is very important. Don't let me forget I know what I'm going to say. The wording is very important, what they say about your rights. Okay? This is a letter to, of course, England. And I guess you can call it a resignation letter. It's a letter of dissolution, maybe, when in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God. Pause. In this entire document, this is what this document here that I'm reading right here, that have many framers here. It's really, it was, I'll talk about that in a minute. Nature's God entitled them is the wording. Notice how careful the framers are to make sure that there was no religion that was placed in here that made you feel like this document belonged to the Catholics or the Protestant, the Quakers, or the Anglicans, or the Puritans, the Congregation Church. They want you to understand that this is a universal document. So by using this language, it's a safe way of letting you know this is really about governmental affairs, not so much spiritual affairs. Now they use the word happy or happiness a few times in here to let you know. All right. Again, this is a letter of dissolution. All right. It's a I'm out of here letter. All right. So a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the cause which impelled them to the separation. All right, this is a separation letter. Now, when you get further in the document, then you will start recognizing some of the language. It says, we hold these truths to be what? Y'all put that in there. This is the part that y'all recognize the most. Put it in there. What's in the comment? Okay. We hold these truths what? And I bet you most of you, if not many of you, can finish at least this sentence. I'll say it. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men, hypocrisy, because you got to understand when this was written up, slavery was huge. All right, this is 1776 at this time. That all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator. Understand the language here. Their creator with certain inalienable rights. Pause. What's inalienable? Inalienable simply means it is not to be bought or transferred or shared or taken away or given to someone else. It is your inalienable right. You have a right to it. You have a right to purchase this land and own this land. All right. They can't just take it from you. And then we see down the road, we see this so-called eminent domain things. Okay. You see the hypocrisy in the antithesis of this document. Years later, how laws are being implemented, that's unconstitutional, yet here we have to abide by it. I believe that the Federal Reserve is unconstitutional. The Treasury, it's unconstitutional. How the collecting of taxes is unconstitutional, but they do it. They're doing it. Why? Because they can. All right. So that they are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, and that among these certain rights are life. All right. So you have a right, or personhood, what we may call it. But you lose that right when you take someone else's right of life. That so corporate punishment is established here. All right. But you still have, unless you break that right, all right, you have an inalienable right of life, liberty, and the pursuit. It didn't say happiness. It said the pursuit. I think it's a brilliant letter. If you want to X God out of it, it's still brilliant. Brilliant don't mean that it's beautiful, that is righteous. Brilliance could mean anything. It just means bright. Okay? That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. It goes on, and they launched this letter, and because the king it was about 20-something violations that the king I think y'all should just read the letter. Read the letter. Okay, now, I was talking about the theory of evolution because I want to get to, I know some of you are waiting for me to get to the abortion issue, and I'm going to do that and soon. I told y'all this is going to be long, all right? And it is long. Sorry about that. Pursuit to go after. Yes, come on, Demetri Pitts. I believe the atheists read the Bible and they hate the Bible because it is God inspired. Men who are full of the Holy Ghost became scribes for God, pretty much. All right. And the atheists throw out the entire Bible, but when they do that, they throw the baby out with the bathwater. You understand? Because there are a lot of good things in the scriptures that even they live by in the scriptures. They live by a lot of the morals of mankind through the scriptures. They throw out the whole book. So that book is crazy, yet they're living many of the principles of the scriptures. Atheists and agnostics. Yes, they do. So with that, you also live by or are a product of the scientific proof of the theory of evolution. Okay? Evolution. Well, when you're up here writing, you can't spell nothing, okay? The theory of evolution. Now, but not human evolution. No, that's the fight. Human evolution. And I think the problem with the word evolution is that the word adapt needs to be used when it comes to human. We don't evolve as much as we adapt. Understand? We adapt to the conditions. Those of you who live in maritime, you live in maybe the New Hampshire, New York, and Jersey, over there. Your bodies, your skin, have adapted to that climate. We who live in the Midwest, those of you who live in the arid areas, meaning like South Dakota, North Dakota, and Wyoming, what have you. I live there, and my body, my skin, my lungs, my respiratory system had to adapt to that climate. I left here and moved to South Dakota, and I couldn't breathe. See, because if it's 90 degrees over there, and if it's 90 degrees here, it's different because of the humidity level. Here, I can deal with it, but when I went over there, I couldn't breathe because of the aridness of the air, the dry air. It was a different kind of 90 degrees, and I was going crazy. I had to go to the doctor until my body adapted. It didn't evolve. It adapted to it. My father, if you look at my father, his eyelids, it protrudes outward. He looks like a monkey. It protrudes outward, okay? His hands are very calloused, all right? And the reason why he's got his body adapted because he's a carpenter. He's always working with his hands, blue collar worker, and his eyes begin to protect his eyelids, or the sockets begin to protect his eyes from the dust because it began to adapt to his surroundings and his environments. Does that make sense to any of y'all? But don't you think our thought process evolved? Yeah. Yes, I do. Now, that's a great question. Now, when you're talking about the spirit or the mind, now we're talking about something else. But that's not this. And this is why we talked about the Ayanna. Remember the show I did about Ayanna Van Zant? And I talked about, this part here, I let doctors deal with my body. All right, I let them heal me in whatever kind of way they can heal me because God sent the physician to do whatever they need to do to fix me. But when it comes to the spirit of the mind of a man, that's God. All right, He's got to intervene. We got to go directly to Him. Or there are people who are in professions of psychiatrists and psychologists, all right? But those psychologists are those who are not worldly psychologists. Those are the ones who are of the body of Christ, all right? So if you don't go to a Christian psychologist for help, then you're going to somebody who's only going to give you a patch job. They're going to take a problem and give you another problem for a problem. All right. And that's a thumbs down for many of you who heard me say that. I really don't care. All right. So that's a great question, Demetra. Yes, I'm talking about the physical evolution, because evolution is about the physical, the evolvement of the physical. And yes, it seemed like some of the species got smarter with their mentality. All right. So you say that's in animals, that's an evolution, but with us, I do believe we do. I don't even like using the word evolve. I like to use the word, progress. I think our bodies adapt. Our minds adapt too, but I believe we also progress. And if maybe I'm saying potato and you saying potato, we might be saying the same thing. And I think it's up to the interpretation of the word evolution and how can you use it, where I'm going now on this next section of the board. All right, stay with me, because you bring up a great question, because what you're bringing up here is a fight that's been fought since 1859 on how to define certain things and how to interpret the Constitution or how to interpret the Bible. So how do we come to, we got to go back and, like in Scripture, we got to do what's called, what's the word? It's interpretation, but I can't remember the word. It'll come to me probably in a minute. But that's a great question. I want to tackle that, Pitch. I really want to tackle that. So look at this, because Lord knows I love the hot questions. Yeah, I love the hot questions because it makes us iron sharpens iron. All right, now Human evolution was the problem. And in walked this wonderful fight in the courts. It's called the Scopes monkey trial. Scopes monkey trial. Okay. The average African American never heard of that. I would say a lot of white folks ain't heard of the younger ones, but the average African American ain't never heard of that. They didn't matter. It didn't matter to them. Okay? Yeah, and but not exegesis. Transliterate. That's the word. Transliterate. Scopes monkey trial. Okay. What is that, and why is that so important? It is vital because it is what this whole abortion thing is really about. This abortion thing is really about what happened here. It took me all this time. I mean, I don't even know how long I've been on the air. How long I've been on the air, y'all? Put the number down there because I can't see the clock. I don't know what clock. I don't know. How long I've been on the air? All right. And I'm praying that my battery is okay too. Okay. Here's some names that pop. Well, what is a Scopes trial? It's creation versus evolution. What else is it? It's, I would say, fundamentalism versus what? Modernism. Moderist. I would say it's tradition versus change. Yeah. Okay. I left the A out. All right. That's what the Scopes trial is. Yeah. Hour and 10 minutes. Okay. All right. Good. Because I figured it'd be about 2 hours. All right. I just scared y'all. Scopes trial. July 1925. Okay. This was a fight against these things. Creation versus evolution. We just talked about that evolution thing. Pretty much. That's self-explanatory. Fundamentalists. We talk about the Puritans, the Anglicans, okay, the Quakers, all right. These fundamentalists versus moderates. That's what's happening today. That's the fight today, y'all. It's fundamentalists, those of you who are Christians, you are evangelicals, you Pentecostals, okay? Fundamentalists in a sense, and against the moderates, those who are humanists, okay? Those are into these words that pop up. I would say I use the word. What's the word that I use? Carlton Pearson is the champion of the gospel of inclusion, and there are other words that do pop up. Secularization, anti-supranationalism, religious pluralism, political correctness. I mentioned humanism. Oprahism. Okay, Jan Van Zentism. All right, moderist. Okay, and tradition versus change, and we're seeing the change, especially in our churches today. All right, y'all still with me? Yes. Science versus religion, faith versus yes. Agnosticism, yes. Genesis versus the book of Darwin. Exactly, Amber. That's exactly what that is. Okay. Now, how do we explain this, though? Well, it's quite simple. This was a fiasco. Here are the players in this. It's probably one of my favorite. I like to study the trials of America, and you just got to go to it. If I was to write the book, I would go to a town of Dayton, Tennessee. In the town of Dayton, Tennessee, was a school system ran by, remember that I put up there the 1830s and 1840s, ran by fundamentalists, okay, ran by evangelicals who love God and love their books, and I'm sure they love their guns, all right? And there was a Darwin theory of evolution came on the scene, and many of the people never even they didn't know what it was. They heard of it, but they never read the theory. Like the average you never read the theory of evolution. You don't know. You never read the book. Okay, you don't know what the theory is. You just throw the theory out, not realizing you throwing out really the things that are happening in your dog's life, your cat's life, in your backyard, and flowers and flower beds and all these things, your grass, all that's is in the theory. It's biology, okay? But the problem is in human evolution. Human evolution, what goes against the teachings of the scriptures, with saying that men come from a lower species. We are derived. We are the seed of we have evolved from, that is, a lower species. And so in Dayton, Tennessee, this was being taught in the schools, okay? And what is his name? I think his name is John Scopes. John Scopes, who was he? Well, John Scopes is a little guy. He really insignificant in this. They named it after him, but John Scopes pretty much was a coach, okay? But he substituted as a science teacher, okay? All right. Here's the irony of all of this. Remember at the beginning I talked about moral, immoral, and hypocrisy. Well, here's the thing. The public school system in Dayton, Tennessee, issued science books. And in the science book is a chapter on what? Evolution. Understand? That's the books issued by Dayton. And then John Scopes just does his job. And he teaches, and then he don't even remember teaching evolution. It was just a little small chapter, and then he moved on. So another, I think his name John too. We put it another color. Another guy by the name of, I think it's John Butler. So this other John, it might be the Washington Butler. He ain't like it. Of course, he was he was an evangelical, all right? Yes. Yeah, yep. John Thomas Scopes was the pawn. John Butler decided that we can't have this because this is a Christian town. And so he had the laws, or he insisted, he made a suggestion that they do not teach evolution in the class. Okay? And what they call it? They called it the Butler Act, named after him. All right? So if you Google it, you'll see that's who it is. Okay. Well, that became a problem. Why? Because another new organization came on the scene who we know quite well, the American Civil Liberty, I think it's called Liberties Union, the ACLU. A lot of money right there, y'all. Got some of the most powerful lawyers there is. They said, we can't have that because here's the thing. We think that the ACLU is against religion. They're not so much against religion, although it seems like everything they do seems to be, they're not against religion, nor are they against, what was the words I put up here? They're not so much creationism or evolution. They're not fundamental or moderate. They're not tradition, nor are they change. They're really about fairness. That's their spiel. Fairness. All right. So you can't ban evolution being taught in the school and make it favorable to teach religion. Well, they were not teaching religion. They were not teaching the creationism. No, they just was not teaching evolution because evolution was going against creation. You see what I'm saying? So the ACLU said, no, let's make this fair. So they said, we're going to have a trial. We've got to do something about this. And that's where Brother Scopes come on the scene. And they brought him in and says, listen, we'll pay for your defense if you decide to allow yourself to get in trouble for teaching evolution. And he agreed to it. And that's how we get this trial going in 1925. And people from around the country came there by the thousands. And we see this new station by the name of WGN. Y'all know if you live in Chicago, WGN is a superstation, but at the time it was WGN Radio. Tribune, y'all read the Chicago Tribune? Well, that's WGN. And what does WGN stand for? The world's greatest newspaper, Tribune. And this was the first time that a trial was broadcast around the country live. Okay? So they brought it in, they brought Scopes in, and well, two men came on the scene that changed the course of history through this Butler Act. Changed the course of history. And what were their names, class? Who I want to start with? Clarence. Make me whole again, Clarence. I want to be born again. What does he say? On It's a Wonderful Life? What did he say? Make me alive again. I don't know. Clarence Darrow versus the famous William Jennings Bryan. Oh man, I don't have time to go through it. Okay, it's a lot. But an amazing lawyer, Mr. Darrow. Darrow was an agnostic. William Jennings Bryan was a born-again man. And he also ran for president 3 times. And he also was, at one time, a Secretary of State. Okay? William Jennings Bryan. You Google him and YouTube him and you'll see the history because he's famous for the election of 69, somewhere around there. Okay? Yes, William Jennings Bryan. Very popular man, very popular name. And there's one speech that he's very famous for. You're going to have to Google his speech. I listened to it a few times and just a gripping. All right, he was the champion for Christians, and Clarence Darrow was a famous man, and he was a champion for those who were agnostic. All right, and they began to, in the hot summer of July, they overtook this town of Dayton because Dayton was losing money, and people were leaving the town, and they wanted to bring in commercial. They wanted to bring in money, and they decided to have this crazy trial. And even the judge was an evangelical. He had them to pray before the trial started, and Darrow was like, "What are you doing? How could you?" Anyway, it got crazy. Okay, so to fast forward this, because it can be very lengthy, go ahead and Google that story, YouTube it. Clarence Darrow put professionals on the stand to testify on this whole evolutionary thing, and the judge threw it all out. Just threw it out. This trial lasted for a whole week, and he threw it out. So towards the end of the trial, Clarence Darrow did a brilliant thing, and here's where we get to more of today's issue with the abortion thing. Clarence Darrow put William Jennings Bryan on the stand. He suggested, can you go on the stand? Now, that's against protocol. You don't do that. A prosecutor putting the defense lawyer putting the prosecutor on. You don't do that. And so William Jennings said, I'll do it. The judge was against it. The people was against it. But he said, I'll do it. And the judge says, I'll allow it. And he got on the stand, and Clarence Darrow began to ask a Christian man. And here's why I want to say how close this is to y'all. Because when I see y'all going against agnostics and y'all are challenging atheists, I laugh sometimes at how buffoonery some of y'all your answers are, and how y'all go against them, and how y'all say crazy things that makes no sense, and it's embarrassing to me, and it defames God and all that he worked for. It's just best that you be quiet. And that's what happened. William Jennings Bryan was known to be a Bible expert. But Clarence Darrow was a smart, brilliant man. He was an excellent lawyer. Now, he was an excellent lawyer as well, but this man here was the best of trial lawyers, okay? And he began to ask Brian a question, just like atheists do. He began to ask him, because Darrow's father was an unbeliever as well. He began to channel his father, and all of the questions that atheists usually ask me, he asked William Bryan. One of the questions was Jonah and the whale. Tell me, how can a whale swallow a man? He couldn't really answer it. Well, the Bible says so. If God says it, that happened. Then he asked him about Noah's flood. How long did the flood take? And how long did the boat take to build? He said, well, God said it, it happened. And then he asked him about the creation of Adam and Eve. And did Eve come from Adam's side? And then he gave a vague answer, okay? And he made jokes and what have you. Then he made a mistake. He asked him about the creation week. Is one day a 24-hour day? And Brian says, no, I don't know. I can't say that. I really can't say that. And he began to stumble over his words. It could have happened over weeks, months, years, hundreds or thousands of years, okay? And when he went into that, what did he do? There were thousands of people in that town, and they were outside at this time because it was too hot to be in the courthouse. And he began to talk like an evolutionist. And it baffled the people. It baffled. Clarence Darrow said, all right, I'm done asking you questions. And he left the stand. And William Jennings Bryan felt defeat. And the newspapers from all over the country, including WGN, said Darrow won that case because he trapped him like these atheists trap y'all. Now, that's not the end of the story. Here's the thing. Here's the crazy but brilliant thing about Clarence Darrow, what he did. Clarence Darrow is a Brother Scopes lawyer. Scopes is the one that was teaching evolution, and he said, I'll keep teaching evolution because that law needs to be changed. And so what did Clarence Darrow do to his own client? Clarence Darrow told the jury to convict my client. It was brilliant. It was brilliant. And the jury accepted it, said, okay, we'll convict your client. And they did. And they guilty. And he had to pay $100. That was his fine, because going against that is a misdemeanor. Now he's like, that's just $100. Well, $100 in 1925 is $1,000. Who paid for it? Well, William Jennings Bryan offered to pay for it. The ACLU offered to pay for it as well, but I think his boss wound up paying for it. Okay? Did it end there? It sure did not. No, because then what happened? Darrow suggested an appeal. An appeal. All right. Where did he appeal it to? Yeah, humiliation. Yep. Where did he appeal it to, the case to? Darrow, smart man, he appealed the case where? To the Supreme Court. I think y'all getting this. That's the whole point of the trial. Scopes was a nobody. He was just a patsy. Having it in Dayton, Tennessee, that's just all about smoke and mirrors, and they had a bunch of monkeys out there. It was just a circus. But he needed to start somewhere, because in order to attack a law, you got to attack a law from the top, not down. So this little lawyer, this little judge here, you just make sure you get this judge here. It's like dropping a name. How do you get to the White House? You got to know somebody, okay? How do you get to City Hall? You got to know somebody, all right? So the judge, how do you get to the Supreme Court? Well, you got to fail in the lower court. You understand? You don't just walk up into the Supreme Court. So he says, let's go to the lower court and fight this. And then I'm going to put you on the stand. I'm going to embarrass you. And then I'm going to say, all right, make him guilty so that I can get you to appeal it and take it to the state Supreme Court. And he took it to the state Supreme Court. And guess what happened? Man, the state Supreme Court made some alterations. Oh, man. And they had to throw it out because of technicality. Now, that's not something that Darrell wanted, but they still had to throw it out. So what was the effect of this? Well, there were several states, because of this trial, who decided to get rid of evolution in the schools. They said, we're not teaching that in the schools. And Brian was excited about that. And Brian, only a few days after that trial, had a big lunch or dinner, went to sleep, never woke up again. He died just a few days later. And all those states who decided to get rid of evolution, and only 2 states decided they're going to do it. The rest of them, they kept it in there. All right? So why did I bring that up? Alabama. To the Bama. Took me 2 hours to get there. But to the Bama. Smart. Strategic. Oh, by the way, remember I talked about the generational situation? This happened in 1925. I talked about generation is what, about 40 years. Well, guess what happened? Okay. They kept the Butler Law. No evolution is taught in that school. They kept it in there. Okay. Up until 1967. Yeah, you see what's happening here? See what's happening? Mm-hmm. They overturned it in 1967. So now you can put it back. Anyway, long story. Okay. Now, abortion. I went all the way around the world and just to get to this point here. Okay. I think it's important to understand why we do what we do. Because again, when you don't know this history, you will repeat it. Yeah, evangelist, yeah, criminal justice. I'm trying. She said, you're teaching criminal justice. Okay. Now watch this. Abortion did not start with Roe. Okay? Didn't start with Roe. Some of you know it, some of you don't. Didn't start with Roe. No, it did not. Now, Roe is not really a name. It's not somebody's name. It's a made up name. It's a pen pal. Okay. It is I forgot her name. Forgot her name. But Roe was not a name. That was just a Jane Doe name, pretty much. That's a Jane Doe. Wade is a real name. Wade was the attorney, the state's attorney, something like that. Okay, but going back, I saw a great article from CNN, 2016, that I'm going to read here. Now, let me read it this way. It talks about the history of. I'm not going to read it all because I think I've overstayed my welcome with y'all. But here's what it says. In the 1960s, before abortion was legalized again in the United States, concerned pastors and rabbis set up the clergy consultation service on abortion to help women find safe, illegal abortions. All right. Now I want y'all to hear this right quick, because this right here, there was a time when abortions was simply part of life in the United States. People didn't scream about it in protest, and services were marketed openly. Drugs to introduce abortions were a booming business, and they were advertised in newspapers and could be bought from pharmacists, from physicians, and even through the mail. If drugs didn't work, women could visit practitioners for instrumental procedures. The earliest efforts to govern abortions centered on concerns about poisoning, not morality, religion, or politics. It was the mid-19th century, long before abortion became the hot button issue it is now. And all of this is according to this historian. Her name is Leslie Reagan. Okay. The Supreme Court, they talked about on this Monday in 96, in 2016, the Supreme Court issued a decision in Whole Woman's Health versus Hellerstedt, which has been called the biggest abortion case to hit the high courts. But in 1973, when Roe versus Wade legalized abortion across the United States, states have enacted more than 1,074 laws to limit access to procedures. A whole lot of them. That's a lot. The 18th century and until 1880, abortions were allowed under common law and were widely practiced. And they were illegal only after quickening the highly subjective term used to describe when pregnant women could feel the fetus moving. It's old. Abortions will become criminalized by 1880, except when necessary to save a woman's life. Not at the urging of social and religious conservatives, but under pressure from the medical establishment and the very organization that today speaks out in support of abortion access. So Roe, who wanted the abortion, changed her mind and her take on abortion, and she joined forces with Wade. So those of you who are fighting for abortion and saying you fighting on the side of Roe, Roe ain't on that side. Roe changed her mind. Remember I talked about moral immorality and hypocrisy. Yeah, in the Supreme Court latest case, the American Medical Association voted disapproval of the Texas abortion law when it joined the amicus brief led by the American College of Obstetricians. Okay, it goes on and on, y'all. This is nothing new. Now, here's why I believe that this is very important, Roe versus Wade. Because the Catholics wasn't involved, the evangelicals, Thomas Road Baptist Church, the great Jerry Falwell, didn't jump in that fight. He said abortion is a Catholic fight because the Catholics didn't jump in, but the evangelicals didn't. They left it alone. But then the white evangelicals, especially in the South, they joined forces. Why? Because they were dying. Abortion became a bloody issue among white women. That's a tough one there. See, while everybody else was bleeding to death, it didn't matter until Caucasian women started dying. And then the white evangelicals jumped in. They said, we got to stop this. I want to read something here because some of y'all are saying, I'm both pro-life and pro-choice. You know that's a dumb remark, right? As if you're a believer, that's probably some of the dumbest things you've ever said. You can't be both. And I'll tell you why. In my notes here, I want to talk about the argument, the abortion argument. Okay? The first argument that always arises against the Christian stance is abortion is, what about cases of rape and or incest? This right here is a tough one. As horrible as it would be to become pregnant as a result of rape and or incest, is the murder of a baby still the answer? Here's where the thumbs down go in. Now, I'm going to read as careful as I can so that you can really see the logic behind what you believe and what you say out of your mouth. I'm talking to Christians right now. I'm not talking about the unbelievers. Unbelievers will say whatever because they are unbelievers. All right? Two wrongs don't make it right. The child who is a result of rape and incest could be given in adoption to a loving family unable to have children or their own. Again, the baby is completely innocent and should not be punished for the evil acts of the father. And you're saying, what if that happened to your daughter? What if that happened to your sister? You know, what if that happened to your granddaughter, of which I don't have one? We usually ask these questions to people who pose these things. I would have to stand on my conviction. Killing a child is not the answer. It's just not. The second argument that usually arises against the Christian stance on abortion is, what about when the life of the mother is at risk? Here's another good one. This is a great answer. Honestly, this is the most difficult question to answer on the issue of abortion. First, let's remember that this situation is the reason behind less than 1/10 of 1% of the abortions done in the world today. It's so rare today. Second, let's remember that God is a God of miracles. Y'all Christians talk about miracles, but you just don't believe any of this. And he can preserve the life of a mother and her child despite all the medical odds being against it. Third, even in the 1/10 of 1% of abortions that are done to save the life of the mother, in the vast majority of these cases, an early induced delivery of the baby or a C-section is what is necessary, not an abortion. This early inducement may result in the death of the baby, but it is extremely rare that a baby must be actively aborted in order to save the life of the mother. So some doctors say the abortion is never medically necessary to save the life of the mother. Ultimately, though, if the life of the mother is genuinely at risk, a decision like this can only be decided between a woman, her doctor, oftentimes the father of the child, and God. Any woman facing this extreme difficult situation should pray to the Lord for wisdom. James 1:5. Over 98% of the abortions performed today involve women who simply do not want to have the baby. So those who are on the left, those who are, especially the Democrats, okay, I know some Republicans that do it because they'll fight against it, but then in their backyards they have an abortion. So you Republicans and you evangelicals, y'all lying, y'all having many abortions. You're just lying. You're putting that on the far left, and that's not right. All right, 98% of the abortions performed today involve women who just don't want the baby. So you bring up, what about the life of the mother, and what about rape and incest? 98% of it is done for women who just don't want a baby. All right, they made a boo-boo. 98% of it. Less than 2% of abortions are for the reasons of rape. Less than 2%, or incest, or the mother's life at risk. Even in this most difficult 2% of instances, abortion should never be the first option. The life of a human being in the womb is worth every effort to allow the child to be born. All right? Now, what y'all doing is you're redefining evil. That's what you're doing. Y'all are redefining evil. You Christians. That's what you're doing. You're putting one thing, you're reversing what Thomas Jefferson did. You're reversing the law of God and putting something in place of it to make you feel good. Like this homosexuality thing, you'll call it, there's two genders. There's male and female. There's boy and girl. That's it. God created that way, but y'all began to feel this you're in a mental state. You're in a cognitive decline. I don't know, a mental illness or something is happening to you. So a man feel like he's now a woman. That's a mental illness. That's a mental illness. All right. And this man decides he can go to a doctor and get his stuff chopped. All right. You get your body all kind of, it's legal to get your body disfigured and all kind of stuff. And it's okay to do all of this. All right. I'm going somewhere with that. All right. So you call in gender binary and gender spectrum. And they've made up about 60. There's over 60 new genders that y'all created. So the Bible is clear that all human life is created by God for his purpose and his pleasure. Colossians 1:16. And a Christian who truly wants to know the heart of God must align his or her viewpoint with God's. When we start justifying evil according to our understanding, we dilute the truth of God's word. So when we rename, here's what we do. We rename adultery an affair. Homosexuality is alternative lifestyle. Murder is unborn murdering the unborn is choice. So we are headed for serious trouble. We cannot redefine what it means to follow Christ. So Jesus said we must first deny ourselves. Part of denying ourselves is letting go of comfortable lies the world has fed you, Christians, and we have to let go of our own understanding and allow God to change us. So some pro-choice advocates argue that they are not pro-abortion. You are pro-choice, you're not pro-abortion. So they say they hate abortion. Watch this. This is the trick that the Satan is playing on your mind. They say they hate abortion, but support a woman's right to choose. Now let me show you how crazy that is. This makes as much sense as saying that you personally hate rape, but support a man's right to rape a woman. That's what you're saying. The retort sounds nice. To mention of choice makes it more appealing. But underneath is a direct conflict with God's viewpoint in the scripture. So pro-choice advocates often state that their position is compassion and that pro-lifers don't care about the woman and her child. So this argument is a red herring. Whether pro-lifers care or not, that's irrelevant. Just as it is irrelevant whether those opposed of robbery care about the bank being robbed. Do you really care about the bank being robbed? Okay. Robbery is against God's moral law. So who do you care for? So the Bible is clear. Since God is the creator of human life, only he can determine who lives and who dies. And every person who claims the name of Jesus has the obligation to make certain his or her views line up with the word. It is possible for a born-again Christian to be pro-life, is the question. Yes, it's possible. It is likely that such a person will remain pro-choice. Not if he or she is allowing God's word to transform and renew his or her mind, though. So, the abortion laws in Georgia is a brilliant chess game. Why? The monkey trial. See what's happening here? Use the monkey trial as a way to get to the Supreme Court. So what did Georgia do? Georgia signed an exclusive, an all-encompassing bill that says that if a doctor do an abortion, he can face up to life in imprisonment. And the only thing that's allowed, the only way that abortion is allowed is if the life of the mother is in danger. That's it. But rape, incest, all that stuff, no. Why did he do that? And the governor said, this bill is unconstitutional. It's brilliant. Are y'all understanding? Yes. The governor said this bill ain't gonna fly. It's unconstitutional. It's the monkey trial. It's brilliant. Why? Donald Trump isn't. That's why I'm telling y'all, you black folk, y'all are lazy. You won't vote. You won't vote. You Christians, you're lazy. You won't vote. You won't put your own people in office. You won't do it. You let the world go turn around you. I just took you from the 1600s all the way to today and show you how there's nothing new under the sun. These evangelicals went out there, and many of the black people did too, and they voted for Donald Trump. Okay? Oh man, it's brilliant. And then prior to that, Barack Obama had a man in line for the Supreme Court. Who died? Who was that died? Justice Scalia, I believe, dies. And Obama selects this man, and the Republican ran Congress said, not yet. you're going into a lame duckness, okay? We can't put you can't, no, you can't do that. You have to wait till whoever wins this new election, let him put him in. It was brilliant. So they held this man up, okay? Donald Trump wins. And guess what? That office is empty. It's vacated, okay? And he gets his man in there who is what? Is a conservative. Oh, it's brilliant. And then another judge resigns. Oh, it's brilliant. It's brilliant. What I say, Georgia? I'm sorry, Alabama. Alabama, I'm saying Georgia. And then Donald Trump puts another conservative, Justice, Kavanaugh in there. Now he says Roe versus Wade is the law. It is an established law. I ain't touching it. Somebody lying. All right. Now you got out of the 9 in there, you've got the conservative tipping over to the right. Oh, it's a brilliant move. Now you got your conservatives in the Supreme Court. So what do? You pass a bill that automatically, while it's still wet, is unconstitutional. Oh, man. So why? So that you can get that bill taken up by who? Oh, let me tell y'all, it's brilliant. By the Supreme Court. I know it took me 2 hours to get here, y'all, but I had to take you around the corner. This is the monkey trial. Ooh-wee. So what's going to happen? They're going to get it, take it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court then is going to do what? They're going to revisit who? Roe versus Wade. Yes, they are. I'm trying to tell you, man. It's a brilliant move. Oh, Alabama, you've done it again. I would have got away with it if it wasn't for those pesky kids. It's brilliant. Yeah, Georgia passed a law that says that abortion is illegal after the first heartbeat is heard. I'm trying to tell y'all, this is a chess move that they're winning while you are asleep. While men were asleep, Satan came in and sowed tares among the wheat. Now, this ain't a satanic move. No. Why would you be against the Alabama bill if you were a Christian anyway? That's my last point of the evening. Why would you even be against them outlawing abortion and the killing of babies? Why would you even be against that if you're a Christian? Why? You fell in 1840s, 1850s with the fight with the Catholics. 1859, you was asleep, and Satan came in the guise of Darwin. Yeah, and then you fell suit. The black folk jumped out of the Republican Party in the 1960s and jumped on the wagon of the Democrats, and you vote Democrat and don't even know why. You do it because you are programmed to do it. Here's what the scripture says, and let's close it down. Psalms 139:13 says, "You made all the delicate inner parts of my body and knit me together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know it. You watched me as I was being formed in utter seclusion." Oh, he said, you did it in secret, my mama. As I was woven together in the dark of the womb. You saw me before I was born. Every day of my life was recorded in your book. Every moment was laid out before a single day had passed. And how precious are your thoughts about me. Oh God, they cannot be numbered. I can't even count them. They outnumber the grains of sand, and when I wake up, you are still with me. God knows these babies, and soon as that egg is fertilized by the sperm, there it is. I know the thumbs are going down. I don't care. And here's the famous one. I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb. Before you were born, I set you apart and appointed you as my prophet to the nations, Jeremiah 1:5. And I know the women are saying, these actors and actresses and singers are saying, I'm going on a sex strike. I'm putting a sex strike on women. Y'all are just crazy, crazy. Then they're saying, why don't you pass a law that tells a man that he can't spill his seed. You men out there masturbating, and you killing the babies, and you doing, people who want to defend stuff say some of the dumbest things. It makes sense in their minds, but it makes it because abortion is not the killing, dismantling of an empty egg. Abortion is when the sperm goes into an egg. It's fertilized, and then the life is stamped out. So if a doctor want to go in there and get rid of your eggs, that's your choice. So to tell a man to get a vasectomy and kill his seed is because y'all look what y'all doing to our bodies. It doesn't make sense. It's when they both come together. Is that making any sense to any of y'all? All right. That's when the baby ain't formed by itself without the. Y'all say some of the. All right, let me stop. Okay, I think all right, y'all. How many? It's been 2 hours. Has it been 2 hours? I hope so, because I think I'm done. I'm done. There's so many other things I could say about this, but I think I've weighed your patience long enough. You need to study American history and see how crazy this nation, how it was formed. It's just crazy. It made sense to them back then. Oh man, but here we are. The 1920s, it was an immoral time. You got to understand. It was during the time of, oh gosh, what they call it, the Great Migration of African Americans from the South to the North. This happened. This is when your grandparents and great grandparents, depending on your age, they started coming. There were two great migrations. This was the first one. The Industrial Revolution was going on. The slappers, what they call those slappers, those dancers, they were doing the Charleston and immoral, and it was even the movies were immoral. W.C. Fields and You Got to Come and See Me Sometime, and okay, all these movies. This was before the decency laws were passed, even in Hollywood. So you can go to the movie theater and you can hear double entendres and some curse words got in there and things like that. It was an immoral time. So it was no surprise that the theory of evolution snuck in there into our schools, into our homes. It became the laws of the land, and pretty much you can't take it out. You understand? And then another great revival came after that. So again, study your history. This is after the Azusa Street revival. So every 100 years, remember I talked about the generations. Every 100 years, then there's a new type of revolution and revival that happens. What have you? Is it time for a new revolution to happen? I think we're on the brink of something great is getting ready to happen now. But until we get to that time, the Roaring 20s. Yes, the fight was for evolution to be given equal hearing, and now it's the only hearing. Yep, David. Yep, that's true. That's right. The flappers. Thank you, Amber. The flappers. We're at a time. Thank you. Good to see you, David Tadlock. I believe we're at the heel. I need y'all to know that there are a lot of people. Remember, I came to you in January, I think it was. I told you that the Lord showed me all these dead bodies. People are dropping. All right. That was January. It is now May, going on June, and many of you who are watching me right now have told me you've had a family member to die. And I ain't talking about old people who are on their way out anyway. Some of them are middle-aged, and some of them are very young people. These children are dying, okay? People who you just thought that you were going to grow old together, they're dying. We already know Hollywood every year have deaths. These people, they get old and they die. We're not talking about Hollywood, all right? But they're just going to, even to